All right, welcome back, everybody, to our afternoon study session. We did close our last study session, so we have to reconvene again and go through that process. So, welcome. Today is Friday, September 27th, and it is 12:32 p.m. We are convened as the Provo City School Board of Education, and we are meeting at the Grandview Technology Center at 1591 Jordan Avenue in Provo, Utah. And we will begin with a roll call, and I'm Jennifer Partridge, Board Vice President.
Wendy Dow, Superintendent.
Melanie Hall, Board Member.
Meg Van Wagenen, Board Member.
Gina Hales, Board Member.
Terry McCabe, Board Member.
Lisa Boyce, Board Member.
Devin Daly, Business Administrator.
Okay, and we want to welcome everybody else here in attendance with us today. Is there a motion to start our study session?
I move that we convene our study session.
Okay, motion made by Board Member Boyce. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, second by Board Member Hales. All in favor? Aye. All right, we are now in study session. Okay, beginning with, well, we did item number 4, position on Amendment A. We talked about this at our last meeting as well. And Gina has worked to develop a position statement, and so we're going to turn it over to her for this.
Okay. It's on board docs. I just sent it to Kincaid. If he doesn't get it up, it's fine because you guys have have it on board docs. So basically, I just took all the feedback that everybody gave and put it together in a document. So basically, the first paragraph is stating that we oppose it, and the main reason, which is we need to ensure the long-term sustainability. Thank you, Kincaid. The long-term sustainability and strength of Utah's public schools. And then just basically that public education is the foundation of our communities and the future of our kids, and we can't move forward if there are only vague guarantees of funding us. We also wanted to include, because we did have, we now have conditional support, but prior to the current conditional support, we wanted to make sure that, we wanted to kind of see how's our relationship with the legislators, and here's some things that we'd like to support it, but there's some things that we need in return. And so these are the 6 things that we asked for, and everybody can read over those.
Can you just clarify that?
Yep.
We
as school boards.
School boards as a state association?
Yes, sorry. Yes. So the Utah School Boards Association, as well as, so when I say we, I'm meaning USBA, which is Utah School Boards Association, along with our JLC, which is our Joint Legislative Committee, which is also with our superintendents throughout the state and our business administrators throughout the state. Is that correct? So we had met and we had talked about, so the JLC really, I think, kind of put this together. And, here's our support would be contingent on these 6 things. And there were 2 sessions, legislative sessions, where they had the opportunity to follow through on these things that we had asked for. And for the most part, I think number 1, there was a little bit of movement on number 1, but other than that, we didn't see any movement on that. And so as our Provo School Board, because this is only for us, our Provo School Board, if we decided to adopt this would just basically be saying that we can't support it in our current form. However, if you look at the next paragraphs, we would like to work with the legislature and see, because we understand that there are funding issues in the state, and things have changed since the way that things are funded were first put into place. So we'd like to work with them in a way that we can confidently say that we are protecting the future of our public schools and our students. But basically, it doesn't offer the protections that we need to support public education. And for the public's information, Amendment A, there's a lawsuit against Amendment A that they don't even want it counted, and so it's in limbo. We'll just go there.
Their court date is October 15th.
Okay, so they do have a court date now.
The ballots are mailed to us.
So we don't know whether it will be or won't be counted on the ballots, the votes. However, so I guess that's part of the discussion we can have here. Do we want to continue with this, despite the fact that it may or may not be on the ballot? But this is the document that I came up with, and I sent it to the board previously, blind copied everybody on it, so that we could all take a look at it. Do you have any comments or questions?
I guess, because there's two categories, like the letter specifically and what it would say, and then do we want to adopt this?
Yes, so do we
or
have any?
drop it,
So what
right?
discussion do we want to have surrounding whether or not we want, so if there's nothing for the actual document,
I have one thing on the actual document. I think we should, if we do decide to adopt this, maybe just take out strongly oppose. We can just say we oppose. I don't think we need to put that descriptor there. That was my only, I think,
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm okay with that.
that stood out to me. Also, I guess I want to understand, so we adopt this position statement, and then you're saying we would send a letter to to whom? We would write a letter to the public? Like, talk to me about that.
Go ahead.
yeah, I don't think we need to, I guess I didn't anticipate we'd send this
Oh, I
out.
thought you were saying.
But maybe,
Oh,
I think
okay.
it's more just to be very clear, and if there's constituents and people in our
Okay.
communities, our PTAs, following this, that if they were to ask as a board, I do think it can signify to them that we have collectively taken a position on this, and that they can find it if they're interested in it. And then we could communicate that if we want to ourselves, but I guess I wasn't anticipating we send this out, or even we don't need to send a letter to legislators, but for
Okay.
people curious and wondering what we think,
Okay.
we
Are we-
have something.
But
Are we
only
legal-
the 7 of us would be able to send it out.
But are we
Right,
legally
that's true.
allowed to put this on like provo.edu under,
know.
Feel like we-
under boards?
Well, this is,
That's what
This
wanna
is in our
understand.
board docs because we're talking about it in a meeting, which is appropriate.
Yeah.
But after that, like, it can't be like, front page of our website, the
Sure.
board is against Amendment A, right?
So we would just live in board docs.
Mhm.
We can
If we
share it
both
on our own,
Yes.
Our
Social
own
media.
communications as board members. Mhm. So, if we wanted to, as a board, coming from us as a board, if there was a desire to send it to anyone specifically, we could. I haven't heard anyone talk about that, but if we wanted to, we could.
like the Daily Herald.
I'd be fine sending it to our legislators. They already know, but they might as well, I mean, I don't see any point in us writing this up and then hiding it from our legislators.
Yeah.
I was grateful that you put sort of, here are the commitments that we've been looking for, because I can see like the benefit to the greater public of finding a way to balance the state's budget and, enabling them to use resources that exist, as long as we're sure that the resources will first come and adequately support the work we're doing to educate kids in the state, right? And so I'm grateful that you put that down there, just so that people understand this is not us taking a partisan position at all. This is actually us just saying, we have to do what's best for kids. That's our sworn duty as board members. And what's best for kids is to consistently, adequately fund education. And beyond that, I don't think anyone's trying to tell someone else what to do with resources, but we just need to see that for sure is going to happen at a level where we can keep up with the cost of living and all of the other things. We can keep our teachers here, et cetera. So thank you for putting that in there, because I think it's important. I wouldn't be opposed to it otherwise if I felt there was a guarantee that we would adequately or sufficient, there's some definition of what those words mean to prioritize. Like if we could quantify prioritize in a way that we knew was really sufficient, I would feel
And I think board members throughout the state have, in conversations that I've had with them, have echoed exactly that. It's not that we want to hoard all the money for us. We recognize there's an issue with funding and budgeting, but we need some better guarantees about how, I personally am concerned about the future of public education. I'm not alarmed yet, but I'm getting there. And I think I was elected to safeguard public education, at least for the kids in our district. And so I cannot in good conscience support Amendment A. So I'm okay with this, but I'm also, go ahead.
Sorry, no. Well, and I think, because I think what is being asked on the ballot, right, is a reversal of a guarantee that has been put in to really prioritize education. So I think while there are maybe budgetary constraints and changes that need to happen, it's just like reversing something that has given a guarantee, which we still know could be more, is just a really, I think it's a big deal, right?
It does argue too, I've heard before the comment like, well, if we had more money, we could allocate it to public ed, and I'm thinking, wait, this makes it sound like there is a lot more money not being allocated when we have needs to support various things like our safety and security measures, et cetera. Like, if we're prioritizing that, let's help make sure schools can fairly pay for that, right? And not lose quality instruction to support that. Let's not make it either or, safety or learning. So if that money exists and could be going elsewhere, then that raises some questions for me.
Have there been other districts that have done this?
Canyons.
Canyons
They
did,
had it on their September 17th. I was texting to find out if they had actually passed it. I don't know.
and they made a statement on, when it was SJR 10,
Yeah,
they
they
did, Canyons did make a statement on it. I don't know about, they're the only ones I know of.
I don't know.
I know that other districts were talking about what they wanted to do, but I don't know if anyone actually.
I know there's at least another district that had expressed concern about it as a whole district, back when we were talking about as an association. But I don't know if they did anything formal after that.
I don't see, I think we're all in agreement. I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but I think we're all in agreement to go ahead with this, and I have no problem voting on it.
Any other thoughts about it? So I just realized, and this is my bad for not noticing it sooner, we don't actually have it on the business meeting agenda to take a formal vote for today. So we can either just say, are we in consensus right now and move forward and here it is, or we can, at October 8th, put it on our business meeting as a formal vote.
I'd like to put it on our business meeting.
Put it on the business
Yeah,
meeting.
'cause that's,
I think it has more power
More
that way.
power. Okay, I agree.
but we could do, I mean, in theory, we're in consensus, and then we can
Okay,
vote, right?
okay. We will add that to our business meeting.
So I will
Yes.
redo it and just take out the word strongly. Is that,
Yeah.
I think so.
that's fine.
And I think one thing.
And then do we want to add like our names at the bottom, or at least?
Oh, yeah, I was gonna ask if we wanted a title. Do we want a title for this, or, I don't know. And then, yes, I will add names, our names at the bottom. I'll put president, vice
Do we want our
president.
individual names, or is everyone okay
Mhm.
with that?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I guess that's a good question.
I think so.
Individual names?
I
Okay.
think it's more.
Okay. Meg, were you gonna say?
I just wanted to say too, I think sometimes there's right, hesitancy, like, should we do this? You know, what does this do to our working relationship with our legislators? But I think that each of us and our entities are operating with what we do have responsibility over, and I think this is part of our working relationship with them, you know, and I think the way it's worded and kind of what we've set forth can be part of that respect between the two entities. And if we don't, yeah, we gotta come with what we are charged to do too, what we feel is right for our kids in public education, so.
Very good. All right. Okay, we will move on to our next item, which is the final strategic plan handout and proposal for implementation, and we will turn that over to Wendy.
All right, I can project here. Do you want to do it, Shauna, or do you want me to do it? Go for it. Okay. So first off, I want to thank Shauna. Not only has she been doing all of this website audit, but she helped us grab all of these files and then put this together because I got so frustrated dealing with the other company kind of back and forth. And so she helped us, she and Michelle Eldridge actually went through and helped us look over all of our typos and make sure that everything was right. And so I hope you have had a chance to look at it. I think it tries to capture what we wanted. We got our core values in the right order, I think. I think the mission is really bold and kind of is attention grabbing. And then we did change the order, so it goes 1, 2, 3 on the priorities, which actually, once that was fixed, made me feel so much better about it. I don't know what was happening. I guess I don't know, it was really bugging me and I didn't realize why it was bugging me, so. Anyway, and then when you open this, then the way it will open is this picture would be on the left, and then the goals and strategies are gonna be on the right, and it'll do that with each priority. We went in and made sure that all of the years were 2025 through 2030. We tried to clarify any acronyms that we were using. We tried to spell those out so that it made a little bit more sense. There's priority 2. And then we changed on, I just wanted to give you a heads up that we changed on these key performance indicators. Because the survey data is usually done on a 4-point scale, and I was saying increase by 4 points, I was like, I don't even know what that's gonna look like. So we did 4% in our, so we'll identify our 3 priority areas, and then we want to keep improving by 4% each year.
Is that for the ODRs?
That's for the climate survey, and then the ODRs, we want them to drop by 2% for all student groups, so that in the end, they would be below 4% total.
I had a question about that.
Yeah.
But I can wait till you're done.
No, go ahead.
Well, just, if we're gonna decrease a certain amount per year and by the end be below 4% total, but we don't know where we're actually starting, I just wondered, do you know what I'm saying? Like, do we know roughly where we are now to know that we could, at that rate of decrease, hit below 4%?
Yeah, I think we can.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, because
That's a good
without that
question.
starting number, I was like, that
No.
sounds great, except I have no idea. if
I'm
we're-
worried. No,
if
I think,
where we are.
I think we can.
And then I liked how you have baseline survey data there, but under priority 1, you have actual numbers for 2025, and I just,
Those are our goals for
Okay,
2025,
gotcha.
based on an increase from 2024.
from 24, okay, great,
Mhm.
thanks.
You bet. Then we have priority 3. And we got that all fixed because there were some weird goals and strategies that had been put in place there that I was like, what is happening? And I think we got all of the spacing and everything right. So we had several of us looking at it multiple times. So, and then we did our acknowledgements. We didn't have Angela Anderson's name on there. We got that added. And then I didn't want it just to be like a blank page on the end, so we added another picture so that it just made more sense. So anyway, thoughts, questions?
Looks great, looks good. It's fun to see it.
I cannot even tell you like how much I cried when I like read through the final thing. I was very happy about it. So Shauna, do you want to add anything? Just huge thank you to getting this all put together. So
Jennifer found a typo in the 1-pager that we fixed.
okay, good.
Yeah, there's a couple.
So on the 1-pager, Jennifer found a typo that I did fix, and I think we have the updated one in there. And the
Okay.
postcard, Jennifer felt the second page was a little boring, so I spiced it up a little by adding a picture. So hopefully we're good.
And we did put a QR code in there, so it is
Yes.
linking it to more detailed information up. from the
Currently, it just
brochure.
says page under construction,
Yeah,
but we
but
will
it'll
be
get there.
doing that.
I just had a couple questions. Under priority 2, let me go back from my notes to the document. From priority 2, let me find it, and then goal 1, the first goal. I feel like this is our only goal where we don't have like a number associated with it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, increase the number of students who feel, like, I love the goal, but I just wondered if we want to say increase by certain percent or not. Like, it is there in terms of the increases in the right under your key performance indicators. So I guess that was just in terms of consistency. In other goals, we would say we're going to increase this by 15%. Do you know what I'm saying? Like some kind of number that's just, so that was my first question, and I don't think we have to do it. It was just a question that came up as I was looking over it. That's just the number of students and families who feel that our schools and districts provide welcoming, et cetera. Because we do have, like the other ones, we're gonna increase or decrease by a certain percentage. That's the only one I saw without that number.
So I think the reason that we did that is because we're hoping that the survey is gonna focus on 3 different areas, and we wanna identify what those 3 areas are once we get our baseline data. So that was, if somebody else can help remind me, but that's why I felt like we did not end up with a number there. And then we did add a number on the chronically absent one. We
Yeah,
didn't have
I
one
saw that. That
originally,
was
but,
great.
yeah.
And then I think the only other thing, let me see.
Is this the right postcard? Perfect. It looks awesome.
That's fun.
Oh, on the third priority,
Mhm.
that first goal where we're talking about teacher retention, under the strategies, where we talk about implementing an employment satisfaction survey, is that something we would do annually?
Probably, yeah, at least.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I just was curious about, I just had a question about that.
Yeah.
I think for me, that was it on the, yeah, everything looks amazing, by the way. It was so good.
Okay. So if you're ready, then, and then the business meeting, you can vote to adopt that. And then we can talk about in our implementation plan, how we want this out. Do we want to keep the brochure as a digital copy and just do one-pagers and postcards? Anyway, we can talk more about that in just a minute. So I did put in place just a brainstorm of a strategic plan implementation, and I'm happy to turn this over to Michelle and her team to make it look pretty at some point so that it will not just be a really boring document. But as we were kind of looking at this, we divided this into 4 areas of implementation. So the education is all about informing people about what our strategic plan looks like. So you'll notice that I put goals. I don't know if it's really a goal or it's just this is what we're gonna do, and then the specific action items that are really tied to that and the completion date. Then you'll notice how we're making sure that the strategic plan is guiding our practice, so how it's gonna change the way in which we do things in Provo City School District. And then the accountability piece will be more about reporting. I had some questions about how often you want reports on different things and what you want that to look like. And then we also talked about marketing. So all of this is just a draft version. I would love to get feedback on it. This doesn't need approval per se, but then we can bring back a more formalized, this is what we're gonna do and how it's gonna lay out and whatnot. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of things that we'll already start on October 3rd with our principals. They've already had a really quick overview, but we really want them to see what this is about and what it looks like when we're using it to guide what it is that we do. And then the goal eventually is to help them see how they're gonna align their school improvement plans to the strategic plan. So there's specific things, for example, that they're doing academically with Acadience or RISE and how that helps us with end of levels, or that they're doing with NWEA that's going to help with Aspire testing or those pieces. And then we need to make sure that our teachers are educated on this. So we're going to help the principals. October 22nd is a professional development day. We will incorporate that into a presentation that then the principals will take to their faculties. And then allow them to have access to it as well. And then we have to figure out a way in which we get this to all employees, right? So that's probably gonna be through some sort of video or voiced over presentation that different directors could use in a department meeting as they see fit. And so the goal would be to have that in place by November 1st. And then we need to educate our community about it. And so by January, this really has to be on our website, has to be part of our district office, in our schools, all of those pieces. And so we can talk more about that in the marketing piece. But just starting with leaders and then kind of moving down in that direction so that everyone by the new year is aware of what's happening. And then I really would like us in our leadership to do a deeper dive into each priority with our principal leadership meetings and assistant principal leadership meetings. What does this look like in guiding your work? How is it tied to our PLCs and our PBIS and school climate? And so emphasizing each of the priorities and getting them to really examine, how does this change the work that I'm doing? How are what they're already doing fits into this? So I don't want them to invent a whole bunch of new things. I want them to just start talking about it in relationship to the strategic plan. They already have these pieces in place, so just aligning it is the most important piece. This is not, here's another thing. This is, you're doing this, now let's just use the same language to talk about it. The strategic plan in practice should be guiding our discussions and priorities in district level meetings. Our agendas already have our mission, vision, and values on them. But we talked about making sure that in our agendas that we actually are prioritizing, like in cabinet and MTSS, action items that are tied to the specific priorities. And that we would identify those agenda items based on, right now we identify them on like how important they are, like is it priority 1, is it priority 2, is it priority 3? But now those priority 1, 2, and 3 will be tied directly to the strategic plan. Obviously, we're gonna have management decisions that just need to be made sometimes that aren't gonna necessarily tie directly to this, but we should be seeing that a majority of our time is tied to accomplishing our goals. And that is reflected in our agendas, that's reflected in our meeting notes, and that people could see that. Should be guiding our policy making and priorities for our board and for district leadership. You know, looking at our board meetings, do our discussions reflect the strategic plan and the goals and the strategies? And it should be guiding our budgeting and expenditures. So as we're making decisions about spending, I would hope that our questions come back as which priority, which goal is this helping us accomplish? How much of a priority is this in relationship to other things? And that we can really contextualize that as well as articulate those pieces. And I think it will help us prioritize some things. Granted, if we have to pay for 10 different things and they're all in the priorities and we can only afford 5 of them, then we're gonna have to prioritize within the priorities, right? We know that's gonna happen, so. And then as we develop as the schools develop their school improvement plans for the following year, we wanna adjust that template to make sure that they're connecting it to the 3 priorities. So when you see that school improvement plan, it's like we're seeing our strategic plan as this is what our district is doing, and this is what the school is doing to help the district accomplish their goals. And it's unique to that school based on the challenges that they have, but it should be connected with that so they don't feel like, oh, here's just another plan and here's another set of goals I got. It just really, we just wanna make sure that that's all aligned and they can really justify the spending of their trust lands money, their TSSA money, based on this is how it's supporting the strategic plan as well as our school improvement plan. I think that just improves the transparency. I also thought about, and didn't know what you thought about this, but I wondered if we needed a subcommittee for each priority led by district leadership, 2 to 3 board members. Maybe it even has a teacher and a principal. I don't want to overwork people, but I do like to have different perspectives and feedback. Is this something where this subcommittee then, you know, like if I'm looking at wellness and safety, is that something that student services leads out on and they're really helping us do a deep dive analysis of those specific goals, and there's 2 or 3 board members that serve on that, and then they're just creating a summary to the rest of the board. I didn't know if that, I don't want to create more work for anybody, but I didn't know if that was a better way of doing it than doing really thorough, detailed reports every quarter, or how you wanted that to look at. But I have seen some districts create their subcommittees, almost like a finance committee and a capital facilities committee. There's a committee for each of these priorities. And you might not need one for stewardship because we already have a communications committee. We have a, you know, capital facilities, and so that might just already fit there. And we have a school safety committee, you know, and so there might be, we might only need to add maybe one other one, you know, or something. And so I just feel like we need to align the committees that we have with how does this fit in with the strategic plan. So So maybe that's a better way to say that than creating another creating another committee. And then on the accountability piece, just gathering the baseline data. Our goal is to share mid-year data and end-of-year baseline data with you. And then at the end of the school year, really creating a reflection on our progress and then our action items for the following year. And prepare those reports that would include those specific action items. We talked about their school plans aligning with the strategic plan. And I really do think that the time we spend as district leaders and the amount of money that we're spending in our expenditures, we should be able to see these strategic plan priorities and the amount of hours and the money that we're spending on things. That would be my hope. Maybe that's just an amazing hope. I don't know, but I thought that would be helpful. And then I don't know if you want to have quarterly reports on all 3 priorities, if you want to do one board meeting a month and you focus on a different priority each month. We're open to whatever, so I want you to think about that, and we can talk more about that. And then the marketing, we talked about pamphlet, 1-pager, postcard, providing copies at the school. Do we want to mail the postcards? Do we want to include like the postcard in a quarterly newsletter with the QR code for the first quarterly newsletter? We've already developed a district committee to start designing some new signage for a district office. So we will have a new sign that says like Provo City School District, welcome, educate, inspire. Our welding teacher and students are making that at Provo High School for us. And then we're gonna do something on the outside of the building as well. We thought about making sure that there are banners or signage for our tech building, transportation, for Grandview, and then even supporting our schools with a banner that has their logo, but also has our vision and mission, core values, something like that. Website that would be easily updated. And then I even thought about like our weekly podcasts. We could connect those podcasts to the strategic plan. So when we're highlighting really great teachers that are first-year teachers, how is that supporting our strategic plan? This is what we're about. Or when we're highlighting student performance, this is why we're doing that. So I just think every opportunity that we have to keep reinforcing it so it's at the forefront and it doesn't just become this brochure that sits over here. So thoughts? How would you like, please, Gina, go.
It's less about what needs to change and more about, I will say that when we started this process and I heard how expensive this was gonna be, my first thought was we're gonna pay that much for a brochure. But I feel like with this implementation plan, it's not just a brochure, it's like a living document, well, kind of is a living document, but it's something that's living that we're actually gonna be practicing. So I love all of the tie-ins that we have. I love that you're making stuff, banners, welding stuff to put at the buildings, because I think I'm very proud of our strategic plan. And like I said, first people would ask me about, I don't know, it's going to be a piece of paper somewhere. I like this, and I think I love that there's goals and completion dates, and I know we're going to have to move some things around and dates and stuff like that, but I am very encouraged that this will actually be something that we'll use.
Especially Wendy's question about, and we started talking about this with our board leadership, like how do we want to receive information as a board? How often do we want reports, or, you know, how do we, and I'm also just trying to brainstorm how we keep at the forefront at our board meetings, like do we at the beginning say our mission, right?
I'm telling you, we need a pledge.
Yeah.
Like welcome, invite, inspire, whatever. I should know what it is.
Welcome, educate, inspire.
I think sometimes I'll feel like, wow, we go through a lot of board meetings and we don't talk about, I think, certain things. But then actually, as you were talking about these different committees and policies, I realized that actually, like what you were saying, we already are doing a lot of this. And if we saw it in the context of what we're working on, and we just made those tie-ins more explicit, number one, that would help me. Number two, I like the idea of if there are kind of committees that are doing this work, maybe when we do, and the board is involved in this, when we do our board report, that would be a time to say, okay, here's what's happening with priority one and some of the work that's been done on our school improvement plans or with our data, or, do you know what I'm saying? Like, here's what
We're
I'm.
like reporting out on the
Yeah,
communities
like
we
we
serve
could
on.
actually be sharing this as board members with one another and/or be hearing from people. That's different than straight up someone coming in with a check-in of, here are the numbers, here's where we should be, here's where we are, we need more resources. I think that is a valuable conversation to
sure.
have also, but I do think it would be helpful if we, as board members, or maybe it's even just, when I'm sharing about the foundation, or someone's talking about a different committee you're on, tie that in to how it supports these 3 priorities right now and why that thing is happening, why we're working on that.
One idea I had, just even in our agendas, is when we have our meeting detail here, like, we can not only put what the issue is, but this is which priority it's, and it might be wellness and safety, but not one of our 2 goals of wellness and safety, but we could still say this is wellness and safety. Right? And just those little things, like you were saying earlier, Wendy, like, we just make sure we use the language to reflect this plan, right, to tie in.
When do school improvement plans?
We usually start them in like January,
Okay,
so.
hence this
Mhm.
timeline, okay. Because I'm just wondering, when we do get that middle of year data, if I'm a school leader and I know I have a certain goal and I get that middle of the year data, I want to get it in time to say, oh, okay, we have to make some changes and actually not be testing a month and a half later.
Yes, right.
Because that doesn't, then that kind of gets not lost over the summer, but do you know what I'm saying? Like, I just wonder about the effectiveness of that timing, and so,
Other thoughts?
Do you prefer a longer presentation? How often do you want to be updated? Like,
Quarterly?
okay.
Once a year? I don't know. I feel like if we're having it at the forefront of our meetings and we're talking about it, I don't think, are we talking about the goals? Is that what we're talking about, the actual goals? What do you think? Like, do we want to do beginning, middle, of end of year data?
I feel like we should start with maybe 3 times a
Okay.
year and then go from there. And if we feel like we're not, I just don't know that we're gonna be able to collect the data and analyze it enough to give you different information or really track that. Does that make sense?
I think
More
most
often
of
than
our
not.
stuff is either beginning or end or all 3, right?
Mhm.
So if we did it during those 3 times, I think maybe that would be
Okay.
good.
as long as you feel like you have the resources.
I think so.
I know when I take data on something even simple, like I'm doing a therapeutic work with a child, just that process of me taking that data actually improves my practice right then. And so even though sometimes it is hard for me to like pull a report together for an insurance company or something, by the time I'm done, I'm ready to do a better job.
Yeah, right.
Just by pulling
Right.
that report together.
Right.
I mean, I'm not trying to say I'm not always trying to do my best, but I have found that just that measurement and that need to report that measurement drives some progress for me. So I don't want to
agree.
overwhelm a system, that's for sure.
Wendy, you mentioned earlier about, like, do we print the brochure? Do we
Mhm,
just
yeah.
make it digital? I was thinking, at least for our leaders, I think there's power in having a paper one. At least for me, that I can tangibly, like, open it up and is, they're leading meetings, leading their faculty. I'm a paper person
paper
generally, but I
like
think,
a paper version of this?
of
or-
the booklet.
Oh, yeah.
Right, and we're gonna have definitely the postcards and stuff, but, yeah. I don't think every parent needs that version, but I do think at least our leaders, I don't know about our teachers, that, I need to get some feedback from them what they
Okay.
want, but.
Teachers and principals to see what, because maybe teachers don't think they need it, but principals would like them to
Yeah,
have that in their
maybe.
classroom. I don't know. And I think as far, you had the question about, should we just put it in our quarterly newsletter. I think that is a good place. I think we do need to include that. I don't know that that excludes having a postcard necessarily, but I do think putting it in our next newsletter would be great. And then I do love that that district that we saw, they had Pendergast, which is also the one that did the citizen advisory committees. They had them on a little card that they would just put out at meetings that the district had. So I don't know, like a little business card size things. I think we probably don't need to worry about that right now, but that would be something for us to think about another time. Actually, was it business card or postcard?
It's a postcard.
Postcard.
I thought I had it. I
Business
did
card
have it.
would not be big enough.
Stayed on my desk when I brought this, but.
Thank you to all the people that worked so hard on this.
So many people have
Yeah.
done a great job in helping us
Really
with this,
grateful.
so. Okay, this gives us at least a starting point and a direction, so I'm excited. I'm glad to, I feel like it's been a big project to finally get some, not really closure on, it's like now you can do the work, right? Now we have the structure to do the work, so. Okay,
It goes to a new phase.
it goes to a new phase, that's exactly right.
Fantastic.
So are we done with Aurora? Like, is
Yes,
that-
we are done.
that-
She said peace out in her email to me,
Okay.
so we're done.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. Okay, next on our agenda is the Centennial Middle School Performing Arts fee change, and we'll turn it over to Devin.
This is just the second meeting where we talk about the fee adjustment or the new fee for the New York trip for Centennial. So this will just be the standard $2,000 out-of-state travel fee that we add to this fee schedule for all of our out-of-state travel. And then they're looking forward to getting their deposits in on Tuesday, or at least start getting their deposits in on Tuesday. So,
So this is our second
This is
meeting
the
addressing
second
this, and
meeting for this
actually our
one. Yep,
third
we
one
will.
talking about,
yep, we will approve it in the business meeting.
but is there any other questions or input about it? Okay, easy. Next on our agenda then is the Elevate Grant for Provo High School, and is that you,
Yep.
Wendy?
So I'm gonna have Michelle, do you wanna connect to the, so I'm not sure how much you guys are aware that Provo High School, so Cami Alvarez and Michelle Eldridge worked really hard on getting a grant for Provo High. It is a school that is an improvement, particularly for MLs and I think students with disabilities, correct? The Elevate grant is kind of for a school that's struggling, and then they get additional money and have to create a plan for how they're going to support student achievement, especially with our most at-risk groups. And I just want to commend, first off, Cami for really like recognizing that like we need to do some things we have really talented students and a talented staff, and we need to be able to show it. We need to be able to make sure that our students are getting the very best education, and how do we need to do that? And then Michelle helped with all of the grant stuff. And there are a ton of meetings. I get so many invitations to so many meetings, and Michelle and Cami are attending all of these meetings. Anyway, so I think they have a really great plan in place, and I just felt like it was something that you needed to be aware of, especially because we had at community meetings a lot of community members bringing up Provo High's achievement or lack thereof, and wanting to be very transparent that we take this very seriously and we want to do better for all of our students. So take it away, Michelle.
Yeah, take that.
You can stand up if you want to use one of the portable mics.
It's coming.
Okay, who's driving this? Is it Kincaid? Okay, thank you. I feel really bad being bossy, like, click it. So if you want me to click it, I will, or you can drive. You drive, okay, thanks. All right, so I put a lot of links in here just so if you had questions, there were lots of resources for you to find those answers. And of course, I'm happy to answer any of the questions that you have. On this first slide on the bottom left is the accountability report from a year ago. you probably remember Wendy presented in September's all-day board meeting last year about the accountability system. So that's that presentation in case you need to refer to that for any questions that you have about accountability, because it's all tied to what an Elevate school is. So Kincaid, if you'll go ahead, please. Thank you. So I wanted to review how we got here before what it is exactly. So in Utah, there are 2 accountability systems, federal and state. And the federal program is at the bottom there, those 3 big stars at the bottom. There's, you can become a CSI school for performance, graduation, or basically being a TSI school for too long. And then the top 2 are state improvement programs, which are Elevate and Springboard. You can get into any of those improvement programs the same way. It's for performance, and that's that original presentation that you got last year. The rules have not really changed at all in the last couple of years, but formulas have been adjusted and changed based off of feedback, and they can do that with state and federal accountability rules. The accountability manual is in the bottom left. That does update every year, and generally it just gets more clear for districts and schools so we can understand things better. This latest update is actually really, really good with examples of how to look at your data. So they responded to some great feedback across the state for that. Our current ATSI, TSI, and CSI list is there at the bottom left, so you can also refer to that. Any questions I can answer just on that as a review? Okay, all right, Kincaid, thank you for the next slide. So with Utah School Improvement, 2 ways to come through that process, Elevate and Springboard. Springboard will not begin until next school year, and is the lowest performing schools across the state. They can be non-Title I schools, whereas all the federal accountability is almost always Title I schools, except for high school graduation rate. Elevate schools are application-based, and they're for the last 3 years, they have applications for those. Those are open to non-Title I schools who have had subgroups performing in the bottom 5% for multiple years in a row. So you can see the 2 differences right there between the 2 state programs. I don't know if you remember, but we chose not to apply in 2023 just because the rules were a little unclear to us as a district, exactly what that would look like, and we learned a lot more last year, and in talking with Cami, felt like this would be a really good opportunity for Provo High, so we chose to apply this last school year. So go ahead, Kincaid. All right, so basically an Elevate school, this is the statute, the law on it from the state of Utah. It's application-based, not Title I. At least 6 schools are identified. And then there are certain obligations if you are accepted into the program that you have to live by, basically. And one of those is a needs assessment, a school plan. You do receive funding, and that funding does have to go to certain things, including an improvement expert that we hire out for. So that's the law on an Elevate school. All right, Kincaid. Okay. So the whole process is spread out over multiple years. We applied last spring and were accepted. There were at least 25 applicants that I'm aware of for sure. I think there ended up being more than that, and there were 6 schools selected from that. So it was a pretty competitive process this last time. We begin with setting the direction and vision. You can see those steps, they're typical school improvement cycle steps, but we don't really get the actual money in hand to really start implementing things until late spring, probably this year or early next year, because you go through the needs assessment process and then a school plan, revise the school plan currently, and create some goals and objectives, which would probably not start until next school year. And then the funding is spread out over the whole entire grant process. So that's kind of the whole procedure of what we'll be going through for the next several years, actually. All right, Kincaid. So we just wanted to kind of tell you what we know so far and what we've worked on so far. So Provo High is a TSI school for multilingual learners and students with disabilities. They were targeted for those subgroups in 2018. So it has been a while that they have been in that category. They're not unique though. All of our secondary schools actually are in the very same situation except for Timpview. They're only for students with disabilities. It is a competitive, you can see the grant that we wrote right there on that link. So if you want to look at that, you can do that. I already told you about the applicants. The application is weighted based off of size. They really look at what your commitment is and what you're currently doing to work on those subgroups. So priority is placed on districts and schools who currently are working hard on these subgroups, and you can prove and support, you're willing to support and willing to keep working on these areas. And then our award was $375,000 over the course of 4 years. We'll use it for, like I said, we're required to hire a continuous improvement expert and then implement the plan beyond that. There's a ton of links here. So the manual there, if you're interested in all the things that we have to do behind the scenes for this, the first thing we've been working on is the needs assessment. We do have a consulting company that we're required to use who will be doing that with us, Innovations Ed, and they have been really great to work with. So we've started meeting a lot with them and with the state on those procedures. You can see those other 2 links there. The preparations in part 2 are all the things that we've been doing. So lots of meetings, lots of getting people organized for interviews and classroom observations. They will be here in October to do some visits for 2 full days. They will interview a group of students, a group of faculty, a group of parents, and Cammie, Patricia, and I have met with school leadership and created lists, their school leadership, and lists of individuals to speak with. There's a certain minimum number you're required. We're going way above and beyond that to make sure we gather a lot of input from a lot of community members. So that's going on right now. Invitations have started going out for those committee members. And then the consultants gather all the data and report to that. So we have a school improvement committee that's being assembled, and they'll meet October 30th. Rebecca will serve on that as the board member. And then Emily will serve on that starting in January, and they'll just like flip board member parent positions. She does now, yes. She knows. And then on that 30th meeting, they'll go over all the data that they collect and see the interview data. And then their job is sort of to get the committee to see summaries of that information and then to help guide in goal setting. So we'll do all that on October 30th.
What's really cool, I've watched this process and I've watched Innovations Ed do this before, is that a lot of times you'll get some faculty or staff that think this isn't actually happening. And so what happens is the call survey comes in and analyzes the perceptions of leadership, teacher development, as well as academic support, and what is the academic rigor of the school, and then also the school climate. And then they go in and do classroom observations and focus groups, and then they see where the perceptions are not aligning with what they're seeing. And the teachers are ranking themselves on, this is where I think my classroom is, or the leadership team is ranking, this is where we think our school is. And then they come in and show all of the observation data to say, this is actually where you are. And then they can help, because you can't fix everything in a school, right? But they'll help guide that conversation so that they can focus on what is the most important thing that's going to give them the most bang for their buck and move that. And they do. I've watched them. They're like master facilitators. I don't know. They're just amazing. And they get people to realize, I need to not take this personally. I need to see that there are things that we can do, and it's totally within our control. So I'm really excited for them to participate in this. Sorry, I didn't mean to take over.
No,
Sorry,
you're not.
Michelle.
You're the boss. And also, it's okay. The faculty is taking the call survey today, actually. So they'll all do that. It's about a half an hour survey that they take, so they'll be doing that today.
And we're actually going to administer it in all of our schools, and we're going to use that as a data point for our strategic plan, because it will help us start identifying what our perceptions are versus what the reality is, and then we can do it again at the end of the year and see, as we're making those goals, are we actually making improvements on it. It also helps us identify where teachers are not feeling supported and where we need to put that support so that they're feeling better about the situations that they're in.
I remember when Franklin did this for the CSI plan.
Yeah, same exact process, yeah. Okay, next one, Kincaid. So just so you know who's on the committee, we're required to have these members right here that you see. So a board member, principal, minimum of 3 parents, a teacher, we've far surpassed that just so that we represent Provo High correctly. So we've reached out to a broad group of demographics, making sure we have the right representation for the school, and feeling like multilingual learners and students with disabilities and their parents need to really, really be adequately represented, especially since that's why they're in this situation. So, okay, the next one. All right, I just want to let you know preliminary what we've been discussing as far as a need. We did this last winter when Cami and I first started talking about the idea of perhaps applying for a grant, for this grant, and then really since looking at the data and what they're seeing at Provo High. So obviously we know we need to target these two subgroups a lot since that's why they're there and they really are underperforming. And the gap is really getting bigger between those groups and not those groups. What we've sort of brainstormed is an additional instructional coach to help with professional development, help provide feedback. We know that these students who are not performing need explicit targeted support, but they also need support within general content classroom instruction with teachers. So working with teachers on content link classes, more intensive interventions when we feel like that will help them. And then we're really excited to look at what we can do to help students beyond high school within high school. So looking at these subgroups with some summer bridge classes, helping them prepare for opportunities for ACT prep, and helping with some family parent engagement opportunities to help them know that there are opportunities for their students beyond high school and what that looks like during high school to help support that during the year. So that's just preliminary brainstorming. There's no commitment tied to any of that. We have to wait till the school needs assessment and those goals are set, but that's kind of what we've been thinking for the past, 6 months or so. I think that might be the last one, Kincaid. Yep. Any questions anyone has, Jennifer?
So on that last part, once that assessment happens, they're clearly helping you with that part. How much do they say, this is what we think you should do now with the data versus?
They don't do
figure
any
it
of
out?
that. Yeah, they don't tell you what to do. Their job is provide the data and the team makes the goals based off of that. So the consulting company doesn't actually give directive or direction or even really suggest. Their job is point you in the direction where the data looks similar across the board. So the company actually can't tell you what to do with.
Okay, and then there's an advisor or
Yeah,
something
so
do
then
pay
the next
for?
step is we have to pay, part of the commitment was to pay for a consulting expert. So that's separate than this company that does the needs assessment. Then this separate entity, the separate person will hire. We have to have that approved with the state board, and they're from reputable people that do this for a living. But we'll choose one that fits the needs of our district and the school, and then that person will help implement and give suggestions, and that's this person's job.
Lisa?
Yeah, first, this is so awesome. Like, I loved all the links. I was looking at all this. So I love, as
It's
we all
probably
know, I
too
love
much, but
this
I get
stuff.
worried you won't
No,
have the resources,
so
so
good.
sorry.
So, like, my math will not be correct, but roughly, you have about $90,000 a year for 4 years from this grant. And my understanding is you fund a full-time, is it a full-time consultant out of that money?
We have to pay for the consultant,
Yes, as
so
well as then whatever
other. So
resources you
it's
want
not
to
really
bring
that much
to
money.
bear.
Mhm.
So I just was thinking as I was looking at your school improvement committee and sort of these ideas around this feels really aligned with your community council.
Mhm.
And so I just wondered, like, how much interaction would you have where that data also is going to inform,
Same date,
like,
same.
those two, I feel like those two teams
Yeah,
could work
yes,
together.
Yes,
with
they
their
have to be
resources.
separate
Right,
officially,
right.
but they absolutely will work together in
Yeah.
all of this
Because I'm
planning,
just
yeah.
thinking, like, I know a lot, I've only been to the Timpview Community Council meetings, but a lot of that conversation has been around these same subgroups of populations, and how do we
Yep.
use that trust lands money, for example, to really target some interventions and what we're doing in
Yeah,
Sandy
yeah,
Village.
it has to be aligned, and with the way that we do our school plans, everything's aligned, so we'll keep that. In fact, we've already shared our school plan with the consulting company we use the same plan, the same process, different group of people. And yes, that data will all be shared and
I just
aligned.
thought that's a way that money boosts into more money, right?
Mhm.
Because now you've, like,
Mhm.
even better informed
Mhm.
that community council
Yep.
with a lot of great data.
Yeah. And it will happen right around the same time as all those things, which will be great too.
Awesome, thank you.
Mhm. Okay. Thank you.
Woo, woo. Okay, wonderful. Next on our agenda is we'll turn to Devin to talk about our large purchase requests.
All right, so we have 4 requests today. 3 are under the public content, one is under the executive content. So we'll start with the executive content one. That one is for the window film at not all of our schools, the ones that were originally done on the first phase. We still have Wasatch and Dixon that will need to be addressed at a later date when construction is all done.
Shoreline, or is it?
Sorry, did I say Dixon?
Yes.
Bad habit.
No, I get it. I was just making sure maybe we need to
Nope,
do
Nope,
something.
Shoreline is definitely, and then
Yes.
Timpview. So there's the 3, Shoreline, Timpview, and Wasatch are the 3 that we'll have to address at a later time. They won't even measure until the addition is done, and there's enough risk of doing one piece of it that doing part of Timpview is not going to be really feasible. This is going to be paid for by the state grant they gave us last year for school safety, and so almost the full amount will be paid for by that grant. It came in just a little bit lower than what they'd originally intended on it. So that one is $877,520, and they are they're ready to get going on that. So that is the first one. The second one is the maintenance truck. This is this is an annual, we have a truck that gets replaced every year, so we can not have 14 trucks that have to be replaced in 1 year, so we try to do it annually. So this is the one that is up for this year. You can see on the sales document, we get a state purchasing discount of $3,200, and so the total cost will be $66,214.41. It is currently still in the building phase, and so it'll be ready for us in December. But I like to do things when I find out about them rather than hoping I remember when they're all ready. The next one is the EAP for our employees. So this is the Employee Assistance Program. The one we currently have, we have some issues with the level of service, the difficulty in contacting, and Jason, if you can hop in if there's anything I'm missing. It actually only pays for 3 visits, I believe. On the old one, the new one will be unlimited and is for the whole household. And so there's been really good reviews. A lot of other districts use them, and they've had a lot of really good success. And hopefully we can get the employees to be a little bit more excited about using them. Our old system, the old system is, I believe, $1.50 for employee. This one is a little bit more than double. But the total cost for annual would be $80,255.04. Right now it's about $40,000, a little less than $40,000. But we do feel like with the wellness aspect of our strategic plan, see, look, I'm going to start bringing up all what fits under the strategic plan. This is key to being able to provide a really good assistance program to our employees. Did I miss anything, Jason?
I'm curious, did a lot of employees utilize the old program?
They tried.
So,
Go ahead.
and I apologize,
you're good.
Devin, I'm so sorry. We had a program during COVID and just prior to COVID that we'd had for a number of years, and it had a longer service pattern. Back then, I think they had 8 visits for free, and they would help transition the person to someone else who would provide service. And then we made a change when we did our insurance changes 2 years ago. We made a change to the current service provider, and it just was such a negative. During COVID, we saw a huge amount of employees use that service, and it really was a big benefit. And then when we went off onto the new one, that same group of people wanted to try to use it again, and it wasn't as responsive, it wasn't as supportive and helpful. So that's what's pushed us to go back out looking for something that's a little bit more responsive.
It's a little different. It's more,
Gonna ask that
it's a
word.
virtual.
Sorry, yeah, I'm sorry. I just was trying to make sure I understood. This is different than like if an employee sees a therapist and bills that through their health insurance.
It is different. This is, so if there's kind of an emergency situation typically, like for instance, if someone in a household, like your child, is threatening suicide and you're not exactly sure what to do and they've never seen a therapist yet, the difficulty in trying to find a therapist immediately when that kind of situation is terrible, right? It's just, it takes you some time to try to figure that out. So you call the EAP, they can do an assessment right there on the phone as to how dangerous of a situation it really is, and they can get you in right away. And then again, this company will work similarly to the one before. They'll do a number of treatment visits, but they'll eventually transition you to someone who is receiving, they'll be receiving the service through our insurance. But it's a longer time frame so that they help bridge that gap of finding someone.
And it's a wide variety of service. I mean, financial help, emotional help, drug and alcohol. And so the other thing is they will actually come to us to provide group training for a school or for the district. And so that's also a good service. I've asked them to just keep me apprised of it if it's being used, you know, and coming up with a specific plan of how they're going to get the word out to employees, so we can make sure that we're just not buying something that is not usable or isn't being used. Not that it's not usable.
I want to go back to Melanie's question for just a second. When we were using it regularly as a company, we were around 20% usage. And that doesn't sound like a very large number, but really for a group our size, it is quite a big number of people who are using that resource. So that's kind of our goal, to get back in that range of people seeing it as being that useful.
All right, that is the third one. The last one is the change orders that we talked about this morning. And you'll notice in the approval in the business meeting, I don't have a dollar amount tied to it. It's more of a approve the change orders, just because there's still moving parts of credits and trying to work out all the other areas like the roofing, that we're trying to see if we can use those same materials for the roofing that really needs to be replaced, rather than allowing the materials to go bad or just forgoing them.
So we're not approving an actual number?
An actual number, just these change orders.
But they shouldn't be, it should be comparable.
It won't be more than this.
It might be less.
I did just do the math because I was wondering. So it's 507,404, not counting any of the credits they're trying to work out, right? So around
Should be
$500,000.
under, it should, yeah, but it shouldn't go over that
It
amount.
should not go over that. And I have specifically asked Westland there should be no more change orders. We're close enough to being at the end of this project that there should be nothing else unforeseen that happens. Now, I should knock on wood with that statement, I did. I'm sorry.
County taxes.
Okay, you know what, Terry, I'm wrong one time.
I know.
I know.
That's literally the only thing she's ever been wrong.
No, I'm wrong. I am wrong all the time. But to point it out in a public meeting, Terry. So, but
Right now, the only change orders that there would be are things that we request.
Okay.
And so, right now, these are the last of the change orders. And I made them go back into the recesses of all the emails so that, because that fire marshal required egress, that's been done for 7 months and we have not gotten a change order on it yet. So I said, once this meeting happens, no more change orders directed by Westland. So is that a never? I'm never gonna say never, ever again in these meetings. But I would say it's probably a pretty good chance that with us being about 5 months away from being completely done with this phase of the project, that we have a pretty safe bet.
Lisa?
So when we vote on this, we would vote to approve the change orders discussed in study session.
Yes.
Not to exceed
No,
or,
And you can
or
add
total.
that to our, yep.
I mean, I don't know if we need to, but we could just say as discussed.
Mhm.
And that wouldn't cover anything that comes up that we
Yep.
haven't heard about. Okay, good.
Not to exceed
Yep.
1,404. Math is right.
Thanks.
And Devin, do we still have money left in our contingency, or how are we paying for this?
The contingency's been used up for a number of years, but this, I mean, it will be.
Number of years.
Well, this project has been going on 4 years, so it's, I mean, and I don't mean 4 years, although it does feel like it's been going on for 4 years. So the remainder will come out of our fund balance. Now, some of this, because we're preparing for the next phase, can be reimbursed by a bond if we decide to go out for a bond sooner than later. But we have the money in fund balance, and so it should be good.
Is there a deadline for how retroactive you can use a bond to
I
pay
believe
for
it's 12 months, but I will have to go back and ask the question, but I believe it's 12 months.
Yeah, you don't want to be wrong again, Devin.
I will tell you right now, I'm gonna be wrong a lot more than this.
Well, would this be, I'm trying to do timeline, so would this would fall in the,
public bond?
It depends.
more than 12 months?
It depends on when we do the bond, if it passes, if we decide, so, I mean, this'll lead into the next discussion, or not the discussion after the next discussion about the buildings of, what are we gonna do? And when I go in and I look at the bond market right now, municipal building authority bonds and GO bonds are almost exactly the same number. So it depends on really what we want to do, and rates are going down. And so we have a lot of flexibility and decisions to make, but it's still in the future. It's not today. So.
Are there any other questions about any of these large purchase requests? We've
I
kind of
did-
talked about the last two, but we didn't talk much about the first two.
Sorry.
so.
I want to go back to the film. I did not pay attention enough, but the state security chief is supposed to make a decision about the thickness of the film. Do we put into account?
My understanding is that what we are purchasing is going to meet the
I
requirements
think
of
it
that.
meets
That was
or exceeds, because
exceeds
the
that.
one that, the other company that a lot of districts are using is just a little thinner than what we're using.
Yeah, but we actually did ask that question, and ours was
Yeah,
meeting that
that
requirement.
was brought up in the security town hall.
Yeah, and part of that is because of the movement other districts have made on the film and going with other vendors. Now, the other vendor is still within that realm, but we meet it or exceed what the requirements will be.
Any other questions?
I just want to say thanks for having Westland come. It was helpful to kind of hear them speak to all these change orders and how it kind of preps us for the next phase, so.
Yep.
I
And
think that was really great. Thank you.
once they started sending me a bunch more change orders, I asked them, I said, you really need to come in and explain what these mean and what the benefit is for later. So, and they can speak to it. I am also construction illiterate, although I'm becoming way more literate than I ever was before. And I actually have learned some things from both Westland and Hogan in the last little bit, but speaking directly to what the benefits are in the future is not something that I'm versed on, so.
Right.
It was
That's-
great.
I-
They do a
that's
great job. And meeting with them directly every week has been really helpful, so.
It was great. So thank you for all that work.
Okay, well, with that, we will move on to our next item, which is LEA-specific licenses, and we will turn it over to Deputy Superintendent Jason Cox.
Thank you for this opportunity to talk about the people that we're working with to provide them with an LEA-specific license for this year. I had a couple of really good questions come from you when we loaded this information into the board docs. So I would like to start off by addressing that a little bit. So LEA-specific licenses are granted to people who aren't licensed correctly in the area that they're teaching or aren't licensed yet at all. So they have to have a four-year degree. They have to complete modules on the state website. They do all of that, and then they start working with us to be able to earn an actual license. And you see the group that comes on as new employees to the school district each year, unless someone has to continue on as an LEA-specific license holder. I think there's only 2 on the list that are continuing. I've spoken to you about one of them in the past, the top one on the list. The state approved her plan. She went and completed the plan, and then they said they won't grant her the license. So now we'll be giving her an LEA-specific license for her career, as long as she chooses to stay in Provo.
Oh,
So-
there are a lot of kids and parents who will be very, very disappointed if she ever leaves.
Yeah, yeah. So that's just one of those that we've never been able to iron out with the state. I've gone and met with them several times, and we've just never been able to fix that. The person has been teaching in this area for a very long time and does a fantastic job, and completed a program that said that she would be qualified, but it wasn't then accepted. So that person's at the top of the list. The other person that's lower down on the list that is a repeat is completing the program that she is in, and so we're asking for a renewal for her. And again, it's a very specific area. She's licensed in secondary but not in elementary for the current assignment that she's in. And some of the other people you'll see on here who are first-time LEA-specific people, they've been teaching for us for a number of years, but they've either asked the principal to teach in a different area, and they've chosen to go after the license, or the principal's spoken with them and they've agreed together that they would teach that area and go after the license. And so every year when we get into this process of hiring, we help remind our principals that they're looking for licensed employees first when we post our positions, and then they go through the interview process. And if there's not someone who is qualified in that process, then they come back to Human Resources to say, this is why I'd like to offer to this person who is not qualified. And we work through it with them. We review their applicant pool. We talk to them about their commitment to this person, because someone who hasn't been a teacher and is coming out of a career that's related but not teaching, you know, it's a difficult start. Managing a class is something that, you know, you may have been a great engineer, but now that you're teaching math, you have to manage, you know, students every day. So it's quite a change. And so we work with the principals about that commitment to help the person be successful in the classroom. And once we feel confident in that, then we give them the approval to go ahead and offer for the LEA specific. We have about 850 teachers in our system, and you're seeing that there's 12 people here on the list, 13, I believe, and 2 of them are ongoing. So it's about 11 new people to Provo School District this year. And total, we have just under 40 that, so you will approve for this year, and then they have 3 years to complete it. So we don't bring them back to you as long as they are continuing to make the progress that they need to. And if they don't complete in the 3 years, we can appeal again, and that's what we're doing for one of these people. Are there any questions?
So maybe if I understood what you just said, that explains, I wasn't clear on that column that says years approved. They all say 3, that means they get this for 3 years.
Yes.
Okay, I thought it meant they're in year 3. I'm like, how are they all in year 3? Okay,
Yeah, great question. I didn't get that specific, but you're right. When you approve today, these new people, they have now 3 years to complete the program, to become certified. And we don't have to bring them back to you every year, but you have to approve them on the first go. If they don't complete it in the 3 years, we can come back again, and that's what we're doing for the one individual.
Is there a reason why 2 of them are highlighted green?
They're Jason's favorites.
Yeah, exactly.
They both say emergency. I don't know if that's the only thing I saw that was the same.
Emergency.
Yeah.
I see that the one is related to the Apple program,
Yeah, they both are, I think.
and that, I'll bet that's why they're highlighted
Yeah.
green, because it's a little bit of a separate program, the Apple program. And that's where, again, they have this degree, and we're saying that we're going to be the licensing agent, the school district is. And so we work with them on getting into the university program and going through the process. And so Apple is kind of another layer of LEA-specific licenses. And it does look like the 2 of them are Apple candidates.
any other quote? Go
I
ahead.
do, so, like, I noticed one of the candidates that's also up for an additional license. It just talks about, like, taking that praxis exam at the very bottom. Is there, like, is there something we can do to support that further, or, do you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just wondering, I can see myself, like, once, it's like when you don't finish your thesis and you graduate and you get to work, and, like, I just was like, oh my gosh, I have till the end of my clinical fellowship year, but I'm working, it was just so hard to get to it, so I'm just wondering, like, I'm not saying I don't want to approve the licensure, but I'm just saying, besides approving the licensure, are there other ways we can support
Yeah,
this
and
employee to get to where they can then feel like they can focus on that? Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
great question. So Boyd and Diana in the HR office meet with these employees regularly to review their progress and to talk to them about support. In the past, instructional coaches or our specialists actually ran classes to help people with the praxis, because all new teachers typically have to pass the praxis, and it had been that there were times when they had to even pass it after they'd already started working. That's changed a little bit, but we still, like I said, in the past have run classes to try to support people. There's a lot of resources to use to study for the praxis. And so I haven't spoken with Judy about that for this year specifically, so I can't tell you that they're planning or doing that right now, but that is how we've supported people in the past.
That's great.
All right, any other questions? Okay, thank you, Jason.
Thanks.
All right, item number 10, building updates. And is that back to Devin? Wendy?
Wendy. Yeah.
Wendy. Okay.
I'm gonna project here. So there is a document that is attached to board docs, and this really just talks about kind of some options with Dixon as we've been kind of having conversations. And then I think Devin and I would like to kind of talk a little bit about some of the financing options and kind of what direction we kind of want to start going with that, especially with respect to Timpview as well. So as we've been kind of talking, one of the things as I've worked with the DLI principals, there have been a number of, and to be fair, I'm speaking mostly about Canyon Crest, Lakeview, and Edgemont, but it really does create kind of and Wasatch, it creates a haves and have-nots situation as how many people see it. And so in many cases, you're only having one classroom that is a non-DLI classroom at that grade level. You have a high percentage of students that sometimes have disabilities. So you're pushing like 15 to 20% of your class having a 504 or an IEP. Just more challenging behaviors and kind of a segregation that starts to happen within the school. And I think we've all kind of seen that as an unintended consequence. I don't think anybody's purposefully designing it that way. I appreciate Jamie Davis Leachy at Lakeview is trying to take her specialties and then she's integrating them. And so they're splitting them up. So at the grade level, they're taking a quarter of each class and mixing them together so that when they're out in their specialties, they're not still with this cohort. And so she's going to report back of, like, is that helping with behavior issues? Is that helping kind of create a more unified group with the school? But as we're doing this boundary and feasibility study and really trying to look at the capacity of our schools and determine, you know, are we using all of our facilities appropriately? What does that look like? We have talked about, and as I had a great conversation with Principal Snow at Wasatch, we've just talked about having maybe possibly a DLI school where we have, and this would not be for Timpanogos, this would be though for our Spanish students at Canyon Crest, Chinese at Wasatch, and our French students at Edgemont. Do you take those students and put them at a or Portuguese at Lakeview, thank you, and put them in a single location? So we've talked about that. You could do that at a school that's already in existence. We've also talked about you could potentially utilize that at the Dixon site and basically create a language school for elementary, if you will. That would, I've listed some of the advantages, and I just want to give a shout out to our team. I'm like, we're going to create this document and you guys need to help us make sure we're identifying all of the advantages and unintended consequences that come from that. We love the idea of kids being exposed to lots of different languages, combining of students so they're just not stuck in the same cohort in everything that they do for 6 years. That can be a real challenge. They get really comfortable with each other and with their teachers sometimes. And then there's some benefit at the Dixon site as well, because I think there has been a real push for that community to build a school there and really keep kids there, have a green space, and what would that look like? I think some of the challenges, it could potentially be a very large elementary school if you're combining all of those programs together. I don't know, we would need to determine how many parents are actually taking their kids to a DLI program because it is their neighborhood school versus now it's in a different location. If I live in Canyon Crest and I want my kids to be part of DLI, do I really want to take them? Do we provide transportation? What is the cost of that? Does it create a different kind of segregation based on language? Do we start, a pecking order based on I speak Chinese or French instead of Spanish or something like that? I don't know what that, I don't know. And in so doing, then there would have to be significant redrawing of boundaries of the other schools so that you're not pushing these schools under capacity, right? And so that's also going to increase your transportation costs. So, and then people are going to ask the question, well, if you're opening another elementary school, are you going to close one? What are you going to, like some of our elementary schools are small, and so what does that do? So, it also doesn't solve our problems with our temporary locations for East Bay Post High, adult ed, our community ed. And so I have some more thoughts about that, which is why I put an asterisk by it. So I'll talk about that in just a minute. But another idea is that's been floated by many is to build a new elementary school for Timpanogos on the Dixon site because they feel like Timpanogos is a very cramped school. It doesn't have all of the space that it needs, keeps a school in the Dixon community with a playground and green space, provides the larger space for Timpanogos. Timpanogos could have their preschool on site. They could have a larger food pantry. It could be more of a community center. And then could you use the current Timpanogos Elementary for a career and technical education center for our high school students? Could it be used as a combination CTE center and district office? What kinds of things? Could it be also providing a daycare and preschool for our employees and teachers? And we think about that in the sense that people may be really frustrated, then that Timpanogos Elementary now is no longer an elementary school. So then people in that neighborhood get frustrated, and then why did we rebuild that school if we're just moving it over here? I think there's some issues that happen there. And then we've kind of been exploring a little bit of a possibility of creating a career and technical education center for 7 through 12 students at the Dixon site to expand CTE offerings. We could hire some full-time, highly qualified teachers that really could be shared amongst the secondary schools, so that all of those schools could benefit from that teacher's expertise. Could increase access to some key programs where MTech provides that, but they're currently far away, so they're not as accessible. And that does align with our strategic plan goals to improve our post-secondary outcomes. I think these other ones also align with our goals in the sense of we're trying to create spaces where maybe preschool or daycare or things like that to help support our teachers and employees. But that also has some unintended consequences because you're going to shift your emphasis on CTE programs. There could be startup costs depending on what programs. I think the ones that Clay is really looking at are not the ones that are like diesel or those that are really high end, like it's going to be an extensive amount, be more like aviation and drones and robotics and pieces like that that are a little more doable. But it will have a shift in the emphasis of CTE and what that actually looks like, because you have a finite amount of FTE, right? So if now we're offering these programs, it means you're going to shift your FTE over into those CTE classes rather than sometimes your more traditional CTE courses. Is that, so there would be some consequences there. The other thing is, and this is where the asterisk comes in at the end, if our boundary and feasibility study indicates that an elementary school is underutilized, we could move the DLI programs to that specific location. And then that still allows you to use the Dixon site for other things, whether it be, when we looked at the square footage, when Devin and I were examining that with Clay, for the programs that he wants, you could house all of the career and technical education, East Bay Post High, your adult ed, your community ed, and the district office all in that location. And so there's enough square footage that you could actually have all of that in that space. Now, do people want, the whole district office thing becomes a whole other thing, but I will take them on a tour
Maybe
of
if
our.
it's attached to those other things.
Yes, I don't know. It
Maybe
might be a
standalone.
different conversation, right? So anyway, so that could create basically some opportunities then to figure out some ways. Are there other facilities that we don't need anymore as we do this boundary and feasibility study and we look at the property that we own? What does that look like? But it still doesn't. We have made a commitment to the Dixon community that we need to do something there. We have a temporary solution as we have the Boys and Girls Club and we have adult ed there. But we also need to finish out Timpview. And we feel like we're kind of at this crossroads where if we're seeking funding for one, we almost need to do for both to demonstrate that we're supporting all parts of our district and what does that look like. And so I just wanted to be very transparent about the conversations that we're having. We've started these conversations, but we really need to start getting more serious about the direction you want us to go so Devin and I know what our next steps are and how we want to start getting feedback and what that might look like.
And it'll also help us, manage what's happening at Dixon now.
Yes.
I mean, we have a community member who sends an email about every 12 hours to maintenance about ways to refinish the tennis courts, and that's not number one on our priority list, but if that's something that the board would like to do so that the community has a place to play tennis, that's something that we need to be directed on. But it will help us, figure out the short term of what we're going to be doing with Dixon. So
it sounds like right now we need to determine how and when we're going to determine what we want to do with Dixon. Like, what is the process? What are our next steps there? And then also maybe start talking about the financial strategies to start considering or what path we want to explore. explore more with that then, right? So should we start with that first one
That
then?
sounds great.
Okay. Thoughts about the different ideas shared here, and how are we gonna narrow it down to what's gonna be best?
I like the asterisk part on this one that she talked about. I
Write
just,
that in the notes.
the only reason why is we are not a growing district. And I'm concerned that if we pull the DLI students all to one school, what size is Edgemont gonna be? What size is Canyon Crest gonna be? What size is Wasatch gonna be? What size is Lakeview gonna be? Then it creates new problems for us. That once we get the boundary study, maybe we do have a shows, don't need to close a school, but we could reutilize a school for something different. Gina, Terry, and I went to Jordan and Davis's. My biggest concern about a CTE center is we don't have the same numbers to fulfill it, that those, we're talking about, they have 13 high schools fulfilling that one center when we have 2. This is a big, and so it really depends. Huh?
We have 3.
Three, but our third school doesn't have 2,000 students in it.
Right.
So, but they would still help with it. But we're talking numbers, like that was my biggest thing, because talking at the Davis one, I said, well, how many students do you have coming in here? And she's like 800, and I'm like, there's no way
Right.
we're gonna get 800 kids.
No question.
It wasn't a big building either.
No.
Well, and
So-
I think that's why that will help to go to Ogden. So I think Clay set up our trip for October 30th in Ogden, and I think that will get, because that district has about the same number of students in high school, so that'll give us a better indication of what they can support and what that looks like and how they, I'm curious about what that looks like, but I agree.
Right, because if we're talking about a building for 100, 120 students, that's a big ask for.
Good point.
Do
I'm
we
just-
know what Clay's envisioning of
I
about how
don't
many
know.
students would?
I
we would
think, I mean, right
support,
now,
she said?
I think it was like between 100 and 120 students.
So you would also take all of your CAP students, and then you're gonna add your aviation. So I think when he was looking at the numbers, we were looking at about 250 students. There is an opportunity to do there are some pathways that start kids in 7th grade, but you have to have really highly qualified teachers to be able to do that. And so you've gotta have a teacher that has that certification for high school that can teach those middle school students. But it gets tricky if you're asking them to travel from school to school, whereas if they're at a central site and they could help all 7th through 12th or something like that, that can be more helpful.
Are these students there for the day, or are they there for their part of the day? Do you know what I'm
Just
saying?
there
their
for 2
CTE
periods, usually for
classes,
2
like
periods.
kind of with
Mhm.
CAPS, okay.
So, when we say, 120 or 250 or whatever, is that they're all there at the same time, and then there's gonna be another 120 that come in the afternoon, or that's total throughout the day?
So I think
Or in the
for CAPS, he has them all at the same time, if I remember correctly. Usually what you're gonna do is you're gonna have some students that are on this day and some students that are on the other day. So it's gonna be 250 students across every
All
2
the
days.
programs.
All the programs is
Okay.
what you're looking at. So, and I would have to go back and double check his numbers specifically, but he's looking at adding a teaching and education strand so that we could add a daycare and a preschool at that location. He's looking at a robotics and engineering, aviation, because of the partnership. We also had talked about electricians. These are things that are not at the Provo MTech, from what I understand, because that focuses more on the medical piece. You don't want to duplicate any of that, but many of these programs are at the Lehigh campus or at Payson, because I think it's now Payson, not Spanish Fork, if I remember right, or vice versa.
Payson will be open.
Payson will be opening. And so those are just harder for kids to get to. Or do we want to start looking at, do we provide transportation for kids? There are several districts that do that, so that they break down those barriers. And is that
Do
cheaper?
our school schedules align with that, that's
So
the
the
other
problem
issue,
with,
right?
so the problem with MTech is the kids have to schedule 3 classes every day. So it's 6 out of 8 of their classes in their schedule to do MTech. Whereas
Plus
if we, right, so if we schedule it with our schedule, we can build it on the AB schedule. We would want to have our schools probably on the same schedule, as Terry is often mentioning to us.
That's
you
what,
know.
they said at both Jordan
Yeah.
and Davis, they both have the AB schedule. They have like the morning block and an
Afternoon block, yep,
on
both days, yep.
Yeah.
And so that is what can help, because then it usually, because you'll usually have it for 2 class periods either every day. And so depending on what the specific certification is, some of them are more demanding than others, so.
Something I'm also just thinking about is the timing that doesn't quite line up in my brain anyway around some of these decisions specific to the Dixon site, to me, feel like they need to be informed by our boundary and feasibility study. But the timeline of that, with then the decision around how and when and if to fund a next phase at Timpview, they don't feel quite aligned.
You have just
And so-
articulated
I
all
know,
of
I
my
was-
fears.
yeah.
I think we need to have a hard conversation, though, about disentangling the decision around this funding piece potentially, because we want to make the best decision in both cases. And I don't feel like we really will be serving both situations, from my perspective, the best we can if we force them to meet in the timeline. I don't know, I guess I'd like to hear the other board members' thoughts. I don't know exactly what I think about it, except that I feel like that's a problem, because I feel like Timpview needs, we need to agree on a set of plans so that we don't do work we shouldn't be doing, so that we push that on at least some understood timeline. In order to do that, we have to talk about how we'll pay for that. But if we wait to have that conversation until our boundary and feasibility study is in, I don't know, what are the trade-offs? Maybe that's fine.
For me, I think the boundary and feasibility study, it would inform a lot of it, but I think the main one that, in my opinion, it would inform is our DLI situation. And that's my least favorite of the 3 that, not that I don't want a DLI school, but just based on what our district really needs. I really feel like our CTE programs, we're behind, right? We're behind other schools, and not only behind other schools, it's not just a race or a comparison, but for what our students really need, right? And so, and could utilize. And so I feel like we can move forward, and if we do have a school that's the asterisk, then that's when we would look at having a DLI school. I think there's all kinds of other things we'd have to look at, but I think, in my opinion, and maybe I'm off, but that's where I really think that the boundary and feasibility study will inform us the most. But that's my least favorite one on this list. I would prefer that we're either looking at a CTE school at one of the sites and then the elementary school at the other one of the sites. I feel like, to me, that makes the most sense. And it's also, and I recognize that my community, we're not doing everything just to please my community. I do think it would be a benefit for both sides of the city, right? Both the east and the west side, and it's a central location, which is really what my community, I've gone out and asked more questions, and that's really what they want these buildings to be utilized, like not to be underutilized. And so I think, and if that means that we're gonna have the district, if there's space there for a district office, then I think that's a compromise, right? And I think we need to be able to put that on the table. I think as long as there's secondary students and people coming in and out, I think we should be able to talk about whether we want our district offices there. I don't know if that's where they'll end up, but I think that should be an open discussion that we can have without being worried about my community coming back and being upset. I think I went way off of what you asked.
No,
That's helpful.
no,
That's
but
helpful. That's very good.
going back to what you're talking about, is it, we've had communication too that people would like Timpanogos off of Fifth West.
And people who don't want it.
I don't want it off. But if we were to build a new elementary, what are they, about 2 blocks apart?
If that,
If
like
that.
yeah. Well, yeah, if you count the field, it's 2 blocks, but
Okay, so I'm just thinking like diagonally. It's like
It's about a
2
block.
It's about a block,
it's about,
right?
you know.
If we were to build a new, safer location, and then can a CTE district office, adult ed, East Bay Post High be retrofitted into Timpanogos?
No, it's too small.
I think you could do a CTE program and probably East Bay Post High and Adult Ed. I don't think you would fit.
Okay.
You wouldn't get the district office in there
That's just
because
what
of
I'm
the
asking.
square footage, but there's other options there too, right? So,
And I do think, sorry, I do think that the reason why a lot of people didn't want to move it off was because they thought the other option was to put the district offices in there. But I think if you move the elementary school over, I can have more conversations with my community. But I think if you move the elementary school over there, and then you have the CTE or whatever secondary ed programs are there, I think that would be a good fit.
And I would love to hear more from those neighbors about that. Because I'd hate to have an opportunity to do that and we don't because we think no one wants it.
Right.
And then everyone's like, wait, why didn't you move our little kids into more into the neighborhood and put the site where people are coming and going more on the more major road, right? So I would be very curious about that. I also, we've had this conversation today, I've wrapped my brain around it a little bit more, and I'm realizing maybe in my head, I'm not calling it CTE school if we go that route, because the CTE sounds like it'd be more like a portion, right? A wing.
It's like a center.
Yeah, it's a
Mhm.
center that has some other, like, several different needs. Maybe we need to come up with a new name for it, but, because I was like, why would we build a whole school just for CTE? Especially, I was doing the math, like, that's like maybe 5% of our high school students. Like, and as much as we want to give them those opportunities, is that worth a whole school? But it's not a whole school just for that.
Can I ask a question about Timpanogos? Like, I guess when I'm thinking of the money, I'm thinking if we already have a school that's fitted for elementary and is functioning, we duplicate an expense if we do that at another site and then have to change that building. But I'm remembering in my brain hearing something, and so now I'm checking it with you guys. Do we have enough space at Timpanogos currently for the population that would like to be there?
It was built too small.
Yeah, it's our
Day
smallest
one, they brought
Okay.
in a.
That's what
trailer.
so that helps me feel better anyway about, because otherwise it just feels like
The
kind of a
Dixon,
duplication of
like playground field space area is also larger than what Timpanogos has, right?
Yeah.
Hey,
Okay.
Jared, did you want to say more about that?
I was just gonna say the acreage is already, insufficient for the school size. In addition to the number of students, how tight they are in the facility, there's just not a lot of space outside.
That's helpful, thanks.
So
what's our
it
next step?
sounds like, back to what you were saying, Lisa, about disentangling. It sounds like, and maybe Gina already expressed this, if we wanted to consider the DLI at the Dixon site, we should wait for the feasibility study, but maybe these other two options, we don't really need to wait. And if those are, that what we're leaning to, we can keep going down that path and see.
Those are, I think, if we're going according to our strategic plan, I do think CTE and housing all of the programs that have been waiting for us to have a house, I think that fits more immediately. It's not that DLI doesn't fit into it, but I think those programs more immediately fit into our strategic plan.
Bringing it back to the strategic plan, good job. I agree, for sure.
Well, and I think too, if we really to happen is you recognized that there were so many things that you could offer kids if you would think outside the box, and it's no longer 5% of your student population, it's now 30%. So at a school that has high levels of college attendees, you're right, it's gonna be a smaller percentage. But when you're looking at serving all of your populations and really setting them up for post-secondary opportunities, I'd love us to be able to say that 30% of our high school students are getting served through major certifications. That because these certifications they can take, they then can go to MTech and finish. They can go to UVU. They can go to SUU and finish. So it's just it becomes a major stepping stone, but they're doing it in an environment that's a little less scary to them and has adults that are really caring about them, and it just feels different in that perspective. So I agree that Jordan and Davis are not our best comparables, but also recognize that Jordan School District has 3 centers for their high schools. So you saw one center but they actually have 3 now full centers for their students. So when we don't have one and we have 13,000 students, that does concern me a little bit in terms of what are the opportunities that, when we're always relying on this outside entity, I think that's helpful, but it does, a lot of the kids, when we talk, Daryl and I were talking with Cammie, and she said the kids don't want to do MTech because it eats up 6 out of 8 of their classes. And then if they're a seminary student, that's 7 out of 8. So they can't even do that until they're a senior, because you still need to have 1 credit of English. They can't get their other credits in there if it's eating up that much unless they're doing a ton of stuff online. So we have to kind of think about what are the structures, then do we need to redesign our high school schedule entirely so it completely aligns with an MTech or a UVU or something like that? There might be some other conversations to have there.
Gina?
So to go along with what she said, both of the schools that we visited said that they were at capacity, and that the schools, and they also wish, because one of them, in order to make it work, they bought a whole block, and then they sold off half the block to finance it, and they said, we kind of wish we hadn't sold it, because now there are so many students who want to come that we wish we had more space. And that's Jordan, where they already have three centers. Davis also said that the first couple of years it took a little bit to get the word out, but that it's now full. And so I do think that we would get more of a percentage, and I think we would get some students who are college bound, but who want to have a profession to put them through school.
And I'm not saying that I thought it was fantastic what we saw in Jordan Davis. Just we don't have the size to do the size of what they both
No.
have.
I was actually commenting on what she said, that 5% is going to turn into something else, and I really do think it will. And I do think, kind of like, I asked this question, did it pull back some kids into your district or pull kids to come to your district? And they said yes. So I think our numbers will go up a little bit if we do it right? If we do it correctly, we'll have some students who want to participate in this. So I think we may pull in some additional students as well. So, and I'm not saying we need to build a palace or anything, but I do think if we do it right, and Clay seems to be a good person for that, I do think that we will fill it. It'll take a year or two, but I think it will be full, and I think we're going to be looking for additional space.
One of the things that we learned from going is that sometimes like a prerequisite class was done at the high school, and then they were able to move on to the tech school to have a more advanced class. So that was really interesting to me, because then the CTE teachers who are currently at the high school, they won't be losing their job, or they won't be moving to the tech school. They'll be staying at the high school teaching the prerequisite classes. And there's something else, but I'll remember it later.
Well, so
Okay.
because
Lisa,
when you
and
say
then
we
I've got-
will be wanting more space, then I get worried, like, wait. if
We'll
we
worry
do
about
it-
that later,
Yeah,
Lisa.
okay.
Yeah, we don't need to worry about that now.
We're not gonna-
No, she doesn't want to worry about that.
I
Figure it
don't
all
want
out
to
today.
I just want to say, maybe if we keep remembering to utilize also our high schools as CTE opportunity centers, and this as a resource in addition to
Yes.
those, that would be helpful, because we do have, and are
Amazing.
investing in spaces currently in our 3 schools, and so, anyway. just
Well,
wanted
and
to
she
put
was
that out.
talking about we're not a growing district. So if we're pulling kids to go to the CTE center, there's going to be open space up at the high schools.
Well, and I think what you're going to want to do is you're going to think about what are the programs that are so large that each high school can sustain those versus the ones that might be more specialized, where you might not be able to offer it unless you're combining the resources and providing that. That's really strategically how we have to think about it. The question I had for Devin was, what would be is it possible, so this is kind of going back to Lisa's question of, do we start talking about the funding of Timpview and then the funding of this site? Because I do want to be responsive to the fact that we've had a lot of feedback from the community, like, don't ask us for money unless you have a really good plan about what you're going to do. And I don't feel like we have a great plan yet on Dixon, right?
Yeah, so my question, looking at the clock, is do we want to keep having this conversation right now and start going into those financial options now? Or and then we might have to bump some of these other things to another meeting, which is fine. I don't know that they're that urgent. Or do we save this second part of the conversation for our October 8th meeting?
give Devin more time to get more numbers?
What do you think,
Or
Devin?
do you have the
What do you
numbers?
prefer?
Well, numbers will all be dependent on what we end up doing, you know? So to do numbers is a little bit of a challenge
Right now,
unless
it's
we
more
said,
about
you know what.
Options.
Right, I mean,
strategies.
I know there of options we could do. I mean, it just really depends on the timing.
Let's get into it. Let's go.
It just depends really on the timing of what you want to do. You know, there's a lot of philosophical questions behind it. You know, number one is, do we want to give Timpview a break from construction for some time? If not, and then we want to probably move on the, I'm going to tell you, just being a Timpview parent and living up in that area, they're already under construction, just keep going.
Please.
So
Just
that
keep going.
leaves us with
Seriously.
two options. So here's our two options. One option is to continue going on with the cafeteria remodel as soon as they hand over this side of the project, and we get that going right in February, March timeframe. And that would come out of our fund balance, and then we could reimburse that out of a bond if we decided to go for a GO bond. Your other option is to say, you know what, we have to do this. We don't want to wait for an election. We could do just a municipal building authority bond because those costs are so similar right now. There's not a huge difference like there has been in the past, just with the way the market's been. We could wait. I mean, like this year, if we were to go and bond, we missed our deadline by a month. August 22nd was the date we had to have our resolution to the election officer in order to get it on this year's bond, or this year's election. So next year, it's very similar. It would be around that third Friday in October, or in August, to get it onto the November election. And so do we want, and really it's do we want to let the voters approve it first and see if they approve it, and then if not, we're still a year out from the construction of Timpview finishing to when we'd be able to go out and do that. But I also want to be super transparent with the residents. I mean, we would only do this if the cost of the bond was very similar and we just wanted to keep going right at the forefront.
Can I ask you a bond question?
Sure.
If we were to do this, and I know rates are somewhat high right now, can you refinance an MBA bond?
Refunding bonds is a little bit of a challenge now with some new legislation and not legislation, but more government finance guidance. You can refund bonds. We have done it in the past, but it's just a little bit more complicated. And I don't know about the ability to refund municipal building authority bonds. I've never done that before.
So let me ask this question. Is there a possibility to use a municipal building authority bond to continue the construction of Timpview? When we get the boundary and feasibility study results back in April, then we determine whether or not we go for a GO bond that we put on the ballot for the Dixon site. If that doesn't go through to fulfill our commitment to the Dixon site, can we still apply for another municipal building authority bond? Because my understanding is it just can't be over 200 million.
It's 200 million over
3
3 years.
So as long as we did that, then we still have a backup plan if people did not,
Correct.
if you had a portion of the community that said, no, we're not going to support this.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
So it seems like one option could be that we use our money that we have to move forward on the cafeteria, use that time frame to get a good plan about Dixon that we could actually figure out and present to the public and say, this is what we would be asking for money for, and potentially then connect the two in next summer.
And one bond.
Write a
Yep.
language in one municipal building authority bond, and maybe even reimburse ourselves for the cafeteria. But if
Yes.
not, that's fine. We've put in what we could towards that
Correct.
cafeteria. We've come up with a really thorough, clear plan, transparently with the public around that, as well as what needs to happen to finish Timpview. I mean, that feels like that could
Can I
work.
clarify? You said an MBA once we get
No,
the two
sorry.
together, but did you mean general obligation where we'd go to a public
Oh,
vote?
yes, sorry, I flipped them, yes.
Okay, public
Sorry.
vote.
Well,
Okay.
by
I got-
going,
I meant go to the public. I
I
meant
just
could
need
we
to understand
write?
the timeline, because if we do it in November of 2025, we wouldn't get the money until November of, right, if we do a GO bond.
we wouldn't, correct, we wouldn't get the money till after those bonds were authorized.
So that
And
should
we,
postpone
then we
this
still
a
have
whole
the
Which
time.
is another year.
Yeah.
Yes, and so that's why.
And your cafeteria would be done by
By
then.
then.
You would have a
And you would
period
stall
of, you would stall
construction.
construction at
For
that
like
point.
6, 8 months.
Mhm.
Oh, wow.
So, and that's why these discussions are so important now, is because we really need to make a
Yeah.
decision of whether, we don't ever want to have the voters feel like we're trying to circumvent them.
Right.
Because that's not something that we want to do. But I feel like in the public meetings that we've had, there's been a lot of support for finishing Timpview. And we really have a duty to finish it with as many things. There's all the safety issues that we have, thank you. And so we'd want to make sure that we had some really good opportunities for public to still be able to comment. But the issue still remains that if we wait until we do a GO bond and the voters decide not to do it, we still have to finish Timpview. And we would put ourselves out at least 18 months from now.
And
Gina.
Sorry,
and
go
then-
ahead, Gina.
Sorry, so one thing that I think we need to consider, and I understand we have to do Timpview, like there's not a choice. The community, my community and others are a little bit worried that Timpview will get paid for and then Dixon will not. Like it won't pass and then Timpview's all done and it just adds to the problem that we have.
That's why I wanted to ask that question about if that
An
were to
MBA.
happen, can we then go forward with a municipal building authority bond to do the Dixon site? And I think we would need to make the commitment that if the public did not vote on that bond, you as a board need to make that commitment that you'll find the funding to finish Dixon regardless. And we've got to start that process of getting designs put together. You know, once you decide what you want it to be and you start demonstrating to the public that we're moving in that direction, not just, well, we're gonna do something. I think we're all very committed to making sure that site is taken care of and it really is in the best interest of the district. But that's why I asked that question.
Well,
But we're
going-
talking about future boards though, am I correct? Are we gonna hamstring future boards? 'Cause
Well,
in 2
after,
years.
No,
after
it-
January, we'll be the same board for 2 years.
Yeah,
So,
so we would,
Melanie, did you still have something you wanted
Well,
to say?
Just got some buy-in from board member Emily.
So, and that's the reason why,
She gave
I
a
mean,
thumbs up.
you pick a day, my opinion would change day to day. I mean, one part of me says getting both schools on one is really preferable, but I would hate to stop Timpview while we're in the process.
Because would it be a cost savings because they already have like all of their stuff up there?
I do not
or-
believe there would be a cost savings.
Just
and
trying to
no,
think positive
there is
here.
not a cost, there won't be a cost savings because of the way we finished the phase one.
Yes.
You know, you leave everything at a spot where it's really easy to start phase two, or 3 or 4, however you want to look at it. So, no, there would not be a cost savings by just jumping right into it. And we still have to go through the bid process. I mean, we went with the same architect because we were very comfortable with them being the ones that know Timpview more than anybody else. And so we went forward with the architect. But we would still want to do the bid process for the construction. Because I think that we need to give that opportunity. That is a duty of the district, is to make sure, yeah.
So I'm not meaning to shut down the conversation, like after this comment, we can keep discussing. But I do want to say, I think today is not a day that we have to make a decision. So I think this is something that we all should process, and then we can come back even at our next meeting and have more discussion after we've had time to ponder the different options, maybe get a feel from community members or whatever it might be. So don't feel like right now we've got to be like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do, right? We have
I
time.
would love a decision deadline. Is that a thing?
you would love a what?
Decision deadline.
Is that a thing? Because
Yeah.
we've been talking about it,
Right.
and we've talked a lot to the community. We're getting closer,
A
so.
decision deadline
like-
about Timpview though, or a decision because we're
About
talking
at
about.
least the direction we're gonna give to them on what to do next.
I would like
in
a
the
decision by
process
the
of
first board
buildings.
meeting of November.
There we,
Boom.
All right, there you go, thank you.
That's just, honestly, we can't wait much longer than that. Like Devin and I need to know what direction we're gonna go, and we can do a lot to start getting our communities on board, but we just need to know what
Right.
that's gonna
Yes.
look like.
And one of those reasons is because I will have a complete set of plans for Timpview right around
Yep.
then.
And we'll have
And
been
s-
to the Ogden
a-
Center. I
And
think that
so
will help too.
it will give us a little bit of a little bit more of a direction. I mean, and also in the meantime, we need to make a decision of, if what are we gonna do, like short term to maintain Dixon? Are we going to respond, I just don't feel like that's the short term is not one of our priorities. And I feel like that's probably you're in agreeance with, is that it's not our priority to keep up all of the little things at Dixon while we're trying to decide what to do with it. But we still need to maintain
My
it.
community will be very angry if the tennis courts goes away, I just have to say that.
But on the flip side of that, the tennis courts are not really in very good shape right now, and so we
That's
are
why you
getting.
keep getting an email every half hour.
I mean, I guess, and to speak to that a little bit, it's not like we don't care or want to have tennis courts there, but till we know the footprint of whatever's gonna be there, it could be a sunk cost.
It could be.
If we knew those tennis courts are in a place, and I don't know the Dixon site well, where regardless of what we put there, we could find that a good investment, then I would feel differently, but.
Well, in reality, though, I mean, we only have tennis courts at our high schools. So
Oh, I see.
we didn't put them in our middle schools.
That's true.
It would be very out of
Okay.
line from everything else we did if we were to reinvest in new tennis courts there. I'm not saying we can't decide to do it, but
But it
would-
might be a capital
not our
facilities.
job,
As a
it's the
capital
city's.
facilities committee, we can talk about
Yeah.
that as well. But I mean, like having someone on site to babysit the boiler in the winter is not really an option I mean, it's not an option not to have someone there.
Yeah.
Because we don't want there to be a problem with something failing. And then, so, I mean, there are things that we trade off, but the decision doesn't have to be made today. But with things coming up and needing to get bids started, if we're going to keep going, we'll want a decision by that first meeting in November.
November 12th.
To make that decision, I feel like it would be helpful to hear from Dixon neighbors and people around those two options that aren't the DLI option. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, do they have a preference around moving that elementary school over and
Do you feel like a community meeting would be helpful to present those two options, Gina?
just see or just ask?
Yeah,
Say, yeah,
okay. Done.
those are becoming the MO.
Actually, I just find them so helpful. Like, actually, I feel like we send out a postcard and people show up and I'm like, here we go. Let's do it.
so we got fall break right in the middle of October, but we need to do it.
You could have a Halloween dress up night.
We could do a trunk or treat.
We could do like home prepared.
We could do a trunk or treat and do like a little community meeting.
one of these things do you like better?
I kinda like that. I don't hate that. I'm not gonna lie.
Ask Timpanogos PTA to do it in the parking lot.
October 29th,
Oh, no, okay, that's hilarious.
October 22nd. No, that's board meeting. October 23rd.
Just pick a day that works for you.
Yeah, the 29th.
29th
Let's
works.
do
We'll do
it.
that October 29th. I'll check with, I'll get Bonnie to reach out to Timpanogos and see.
Tradition.
Yeah, we might.
They have people too busy with other.
They might
holiday
be.
stuff that
So, Bonnie, let's look at October 23rd and the 29th as options. If we can do a community meeting and then maybe also if we could get the PTA to help us with a trunk or treat for the community meeting, that would be amazing. They're probably already doing one, but maybe we'll do a second one and I'll sponsor it. Kids can get 2 Halloweens.
But we're having it
Brought to you
all
by
at-
the superintendent.
Are we having the meeting at
Should
Dixon?
we have it at the building that we're talking about?
I think having it in the auditorium like we did before
Okay, at
might
Dixon.
work, because then we don't have
At
to have, because Timpanogos, there's a school, not that they're there at night, but I think doing it at Dixon would be fine.
Okay, I like that better anyway.
Because there's that big
Then we'll bring
parking
in,
lot.
yeah, we'll bring in,
Ixnay,
yeah, we'll bring in,
for-
I love it.
Read tray, how do you say trunk or treat in big Latin?
I'll think about it. I'll talk to Brittany
Entree,
Wood and then I'll figure it out.
foray.
Yeah.
Ick tray. Hooray.
Just just get Olivia to
Keep
reserve the
track.
auditorium for the October 29th. And maybe the 23rd, just in case. And then I'll get with Shauna and Caleb and we'll get communication going.
Awesome. All right, any other thoughts today about any of these building questions?
I just wanted to add, when we're talking about like, are there cost savings, right, to starting? I do think it's always, for me, it's helpful, there is a money cost, but we should always, be thinking about what is the cost from not continuing construction in the sense of morale and getting safety things. I just want to think about that, which I think we did in this conversation, just articulate that there are costs outside of just money costs that we need to always think about.
Okay, we're good. Okay, I think we can go ahead and we've got time for the next one. So, number 11, our second meeting of the month schedule. So I wanted to bring this up because we have slowly been adjusting how we do our second meeting of the month. So it used to be, years ago, we would have a morning meeting for an hour and a half. And then a couple years ago, we moved it to an afternoon meeting that was still supposed to be like 2 hours and done by 6. And then we've been adding a business meeting to all of them because we have so much business to do. So we're out of there usually, I don't know, around 6:30. And it just, I don't know, it keeps shifting a little bit. And so I wanted to check with you guys and your schedules and the way it impacts you. Are we good to keep doing the second meeting the way we've been doing it? Do we want to move it just how we do the first meeting of the month, where our business meeting that we're going to have is going to start at 7, so we don't have to start the study session quite as early? Because I recognize sometimes we start the study session a little early on those second Tuesdays or second meetings of the month. Is everybody okay how we've been doing it? Are people frustrated? Like, how's it going?
I'm just going to voice my opinion for future board members. My schedule allows for most of this to happen most of the time, but I'm not working full-time. If somebody decides to replace me in the future, they may have a full-time job, and getting off work before 5 o'clock can be difficult. And this is not meant to be a full-time job, even though it can feel like it.
Even though it probably is.
It's just 2 meetings a month, Melanie.
Oh, yeah.
That's only
It's
a
2
few.
meetings a month. It's 2
That's-
meetings
I
a
know,
month.
that's why it's the joke, because
Don't you love
several
how
board
everyone
meetings
has
were told that.
deceived you?
Yeah, I'm concerned that we're setting standards, that there's all sorts of expectations of all these extra meetings that we're supposed to be to, and all these other things that are during the day that limits people from doing their full-time job, that we want still good people to run for this job. And so I almost wish we would stick to, we start at 5 p.m., and I understand that sometimes we need to, but when we get into 3 o'clock, 2:30, it makes it difficult I'm thinking for future boards.
Can I ask a clarifying question? Does that mean you would prefer then business meeting to always start at 7 so that there's a little more time? Because if you're starting at 6 and then you have a study session that doesn't start till 5?
Yeah, I'm fine with it started at 7. But I know that, but I'm just trying to look ahead for
Even if
other
you miss a
people.
choir concert?
Do you know how many choir concerts, volleyball games I'm missing
All right,
because of this?
Other thoughts, and as part of this discussion, Emily, do you want to come sit at the table since you're, okay, well, we're going to want to get your opinion too, because this will affect you in a few months, so. Make sure you have.
Hand her the microphone so she can talk.
Okay, other thoughts?
I will say, getting there anytime, like by 3:30, even for me, requires leaving work early. I've made my schedule, which I know is lucky, so that I'm done at 3:30, but, other days of the week where I go till 5, that's not a luxury, and I have often wondered, like, what happened when people worked, till 5 or 6 every day? But that said, one of the things that I think about with this is the time of our district employees who stay for these meetings. And so I do get concerned about them having to stay that second meeting so late into the night. Like, if we don't start that business meeting till 7 PM twice a month, and they put in more than a full-time day by the time we get to our meetings.
Time
So-
from their family.
Yeah, so that's also kind of on my mind. I feel like for now, I personally am fine with the way it is, and I like that second meeting gets out a little sooner, because I like to get home and spend that evening with my family on that night.
Jan?
I would agree with what Lisa said, and I know that it's difficult, it's gonna be difficult no matter where we put it. And if someone runs, I hope that they're looking at our schedules, not that we can't change schedules, but I hope they're looking at our schedules and recognizing that this is kind of how they're run, at least for now. And that, they'll have to kind of fit into it, like city council has theirs in the middle of the day.
Yeah.
And so I think, if we start hearing that people aren't running because they can't fit in their schedule, then maybe we should take a look at it. But I do like getting out a little bit earlier once, for one of the meetings. But I think that we do run into people who have to shuttle their kids to voice lessons and stuff like that.
So I'm hearing if we keep it with the 6 PM business meeting, we just need to keep that study session and any executive that we might have within a time frame that we're not starting before about 4, probably.
Yeah, I many times have had to have a babysitter pick up Thomas from school because study session or executive session starts before 3 o'clock. So that makes it hard
Okay.
that I can't pick up my kids from school before.
Right. Emily, do you have anything you want to add?
I don't even know what the current schedule is, so
Okay.
I'll make anything work, but it would be great if it was after 3:30 at least, for me.
Okay. Great. Is 3:30, if we have to do 3:30, is that okay for people?
Yeah, it's doable.
Okay.
I mean,
But preferably 4?
Like
typically,
more the exception, not the.
Yeah.
for a while, we were having executive sessions starting at 2 or 3 o'clock.
We had a few extenuating.
Yeah.
We didn't really have a choice.
But that was, I mean, it
Yeah.
felt like it was a regular basis, and it
For a little bit.
shouldn't be.
Okay, so 4 o'clock generally, but 3:30 is okay for exception. Okay. So I'm hearing, let's keep our second meeting of the month the way we're doing it, where it's a little bit earlier than our main bigger meeting.
Can I ask a question too? If there's things that we're bringing to you that you feel like, I don't know why Wendy's bringing this to the board, please don't bother us with this, I would appreciate that feedback, because we're trying to keep you in the loop as to what's going on, but if you're like, that's just, I don't need to be informed about that, or just put that in a board update so that we can pull that off of our agendas. I feel like I'm the reason the meetings have gotten longer, and I feel really bad about that.
I think we can
So-
blame the legislature
I
for the
think-
reason.
I think
worried it was
we're
us,
the
and now-
reason.
Oh, I feel like it's me.
I think it's all of us.
Yeah, I
We're
thought, like,
just,
we are making these.
We have a lot to do,
Passionate
and we
about
need to
our
get
work.
it done, and it's not anybody's fault. We're a little too ambitious, which is
That's-
probably good.
I think in the past, I felt like, why is this on the agenda? This is stupid. Why, this is a really dumb agenda. What's going on? But I think in the last year or so, has not been that way.
Okay.
I also
It-
think as we intentionally tie our items on the agenda to the strategic plan, we'll see what is purposeful and what could be, oh, that's not tied, maybe that could go in a board update emailed out or something, yeah. All right, well, thank you. Okay, we are going to take a motion to adjourn this meeting. So who would like to make that motion?
You didn't want to do your last item?
We'll save that last
Okay,
item for our
perfect.
next
Okay,
meeting.
perfect.
That can wait?
Oh, yes.
Yes, okay.
I move that we adjourn this meeting.
Okay, thank you, Board Member Boyce. We are now adjourned, and then we'll start our business meeting at 3 o'clock, so you've got 10 minutes.